She did something so terrible that she ordered 50,000 masses to save her soul. Meet Mariana of Austria, the most inbred queen in history. While her family tree was a disaster, it was her least shocking secret. Mariana had a bizarre obsession with court dwarfs and suffered a failure so catastrophic that it didn't just ruin her life. It threatened to end the entire Spanish Empire. One tragedy completely destroyed Mariana's life. It made her marry a very close family member, and the age gap between them was absolutely unthinkable. Mariana of Austria was originally betrothed to her first cousin, Balthazar Charles, Prince of Asturias. He was the only surviving legitimate son and heir of King Philip IV of Spain. The match was arranged to keep power, land and wealth firmly within the two branches, Spanish and Austrian, of the Habsburg family. But they never made it to the altar because something terrible happened. They never even met in person. Because Mariana lived in Vienna and Balthazar lived in Madrid, their entire relationship was conducted from a distance. The driving force behind the union was Balthazar Charles's father, King Philip IV, who was terrified of dying without making sure the throne of his empire would be secure. He wrote frequent letters to Mariana's father, Ferdinand III, Holy Roman Emperor, expressing his immense joy over the match. Mariana's family was also absolutely thrilled with the arrangement. At the time, the Spanish Empire was enormous, controlling vast territories in Europe, the Americas, and the Philippines. For Ferdinand III, placing his daughter on one of the most powerful thrones in Christendom was a major point of pride and a brilliant political move. To make things even better, Balthazar Charles was widely considered highly intelligent, charismatic, and a competent future ruler. However, this joy did not last long. In the autumn of 1646, Balthazar Charles accompanied his father to Aragon and Navarre to participate in formal ceremonies. After attending a mass in Zaragoza, the prince began feeling deeply unwell. His condition deteriorated rapidly. The royal physicians were baffled, and the cold October weather worsened his state. A few days later, Prince Balthazar Charles passed away. At the time, the court officially blamed smallpox, which was a frequent threat to royalty. However, modern medical historians who have reviewed the doctor's notes have looked at his specific symptoms and suspect he actually died of a ruptured appendix. You can only imagine how everyone felt when Balthazar died. It was not just a private family tragedy. It was a catastrophic geopolitical event that made Ferdinand III do something absolutely ruthless to save the Spanish-Austrian alliance. This controversial solution was a calculated, rapid political adjustment carried out by a small group of powerful men. Mariana had absolutely no say in the matter. Court records indicate that she accepted the change of grooms with the quiet obedience expected of a Habsburg archduchess. The new arrangement stated that she was to marry a man who was close to her father's age and 30 years older than her. The father of the late Balthazar Charles, King Philip IV of Spain, her uncle. But the marriage itself was almost an innocent duty compared to the other thing expected of her at the Spanish court. When Philip and Mariana met for the first time, the King of Spain noticed something about her that was deeply forbidden in his empire. But what wasn't shocking to him at all was that Mariana herself was extremely inbred. At first, the claim that she was the most inbred queen of all time doesn't make any sense, because her parents, Ferdinand III and Maria Anna of Spain, were first cousins. Many people have heard of far worse combinations. However, there's one thing that makes Mariana's case far worse than, for example, the royal sibling marriages practiced in ancient Egypt. Imagine drawing your family tree. You start at the bottom with yourself, then draw 2 lines going up to your parents. From those 2 parents, you draw 4 lines up to your grandparents. Every generation you go back, the lines spread wider and wider apart. It keeps getting bigger because you are constantly adding brand new, unrelated people into the mix. But with Mariana of Austria and the Habsburg family, the tree didn't spread out. it looped back in on itself over and over. Because her ancestors kept marrying their own uncles, nieces and cousins for generations, the same exact people kept showing up in multiple places on her family tree. By the time Mariana was born, so many of her ancestors were the same people that even though her parents were technically just first cousins, their DNA was already nearly identical because it all came from the same tiny pool of people. But even then, that still wasn't enough, because Mariana and Philip had a shocking duty to fulfill. If they didn't succeed, they risked huge wars across all of Europe over the throne of the Spanish Empire. To save their kingdom, they had to produce a male heir who could secure the dynasty, and they had to do it fast before the already sickly Philip died. But in his private letters, historians found that Philip complained about Mariana's taboo behavior. Historical records suggest their initial meeting was formal and awkward. Mariana was a lively and energetic person who spoke mostly German. Philip, meanwhile, was an aging, deeply exhausted monarch who had buried his first wife and his beloved son. People were absolutely shocked and deeply annoyed by Mariana's habits. She was known for throwing tantrums and laughing loudly at court fools, which was a major taboo in the ultra-strict Spanish court, where queens were expected to remain perfectly stoic. As you likely already suspect, messing with the Habsburgs' genes even more was a terrible idea. And it really was, because both Mariana and Philip faced massive consequences for what they were doing. Mariana gave birth soon after, but the celebration stopped the moment the royal physicians looked closer. It was the one thing no one saw coming. Mainstream history often leaves out the most human parts of the story. The real history of Henry VIII's wives, inbred royals, and the tragedies of Europe is far darker than you think. We believe truth matters most, no matter what. That is why we've opened the Forbidden Archives on YouTube and Patreon. This is not just extra footage. It is the overlooked reality that rarely makes it into history documentaries. When you join our inner circle, you immediately unlock exclusive historical documentaries, including deeper dives into the tragedies of historical figures. You also get total immersion, allowing you to experience every detail completely, ad-free. You receive concise visual records of history's unsettling truths. And as a co-producer, your $9 per month directly fuels the specialized research needed to keep the truth from being buried forever. We also uncovered shocking information about Mariana of Austria's fate after death that we weren't able to include in this video. Link in the description. Nobody expected what happened during the heir's birth. It meant Mariana's, Philip's, and the entire kingdom's problems were far from over. On July 12, 1651, Mariana went into labor at the Royal Alcazar of Madrid. In accordance with Habsburg tradition, a royal birth was never a private affair. The labor room was packed. Government ministers, high-ranking noblemen, and church officials crowded into the chamber or stood just outside the open doors. They were there as official witnesses to ensure that no fake heir was smuggled into the crib. Mariana had to endure it all while being watched by dozens of the most powerful men in Spain. The 17th century doctors then announced something that was met with a reaction somewhere between relief and intense disappointment. It meant the terrifying succession crisis was still very much alive, and Mariana was told that she would have to try again with Philip immediately. On the other hand, it proved that the 46-year-old king was still capable of producing heirs. Mariana had given birth to Margaret Teresa of Spain, but European powers wanted a man. They strongly believed men were better rulers. Under Spanish law, women could inherit the throne only if there were absolutely no surviving male lines. The royal couple's dream of having a male heir to the throne would actually soon be fulfilled, and Mariana's story could have ended happily right here at that exact moment. However, life had very cruel plans for her, and her entire world would soon completely fall apart. People began to panic when they saw Mariana and Philip's son. Even though they did not understand modern genetics, it was clear to them that this was far too much, and it ended in the very way everyone feared. On November 28, 1657, Mariana gave birth to Philip Prospero, Prince of Asturias. When the announcement rang through the palace that he was a healthy, living boy, the entire Spanish Empire entered a state of absolute euphoria. The prisons were thrown open, and thousands of criminals were pardoned in honor of the prince. For days, the streets of Madrid were filled with free-flowing wine, massive bullfights, and non-stop fireworks. Philip IV, who had spent years weeping in his private chapel over the lack of an heir, was utterly transformed. He wrote to his confidant that the birth was the greatest joy I could ever receive. Spain's greatest poets and playwrights wrote grand plays and epics dedicated to the newborn baby, hailing him as the savior who would restore the Spanish Empire to its golden age. Little did they know what would happen 3 years later. The genetic reality of Habsburg inbreeding was apparent in Philip Prospero from day one. Unlike his older sister, Margaret Theresa, who inherited a healthier genetic mix, Philip Prospero inherited the worst of the family's genetic pool. The prince was born with a profoundly compromised immune system. He was so weak that he could not stand or walk on his own. The Habsburg family came up with one explanation for all the disasters that had struck them. They believed the royal family was cursed. The court covered the prince in amulets, bells, and religious relics. Unfortunately, none of it worked, and the prince's story ended in yet another tragedy. Every time the prince had a fever, the entire empire held its collective breath, and the blame was cast back onto Mariana and her supposed maternal failings. Worst of all, while she was actively watching Philip Prospero's health decline, the court pressured her to produce more heirs in case the prince died. Their worst fear came true. The reaction across Spain was a mix of profound, paralyzed shock, absolute public panic, and a dark sense of religious doom. King Philip IV was completely broken. He wrote to his confidant, Sister Maria de Agreda, that his heart was entirely shattered, and that he felt he was watching the literal end of his world. All because, in November 1661, Philip Prospero passed away. But Mariana had no time to process this devastating loss, because another death was awaiting her. This time, it would not involve one of her children, but someone incredibly important, and it would make her public enemy number one. Just before the disaster struck, life gave Mariana, Philip, and the entire empire another chance. It was a moment of absolute, desperate euphoria for the Spanish court. Mariana gave birth to another male heir, but again, people quickly realized something was wrong, and this time it was impossible to hide. When the cry of "It's a boy" echoed through the royal Alcazar of Madrid, the relief was far more intense than it had been during the birth of the first male heir. It felt like a miracle. Philip IV, aged 56 and deeply depressed, wept with joy. Madrid erupted. The city once again held bullfights, masquerades, theatrical plays, and brilliant firework displays. The fountains ran with wine, and the public truly believed that God had finally smiled upon Spain again. But once again, everyone celebrated far too soon, making their disappointment even more painful when they realized the truth. People were absolutely furious with Mariana. She was supposed to save their empire, and instead, all they got was tragedy after tragedy. King Philip believed it was God's punishment for his sins, specifically his legendary womanizing and his roughly 30 illegitimate children. Unlike the typically cold, detached nature of 17th century monarchs, Philip was incredibly tender with his new son. He rarely disciplined him and indulged his every whim, knowing that he was his only hope. That son was Charles II of Spain, and this time, the effects of inbreeding were easy to see. His lower jaw protruded so far that his bottom teeth did not touch his top teeth. His head was unusually large. He got sick very often, catching every cold that spread through the palace. The court lived in constant fear that he would die at any moment. But while Charles miraculously survived longer than expected, another person in the royal court was not so lucky. This was exactly what everyone had feared. What happened had an enormous effect on Mariana, who coped with the loss in shocking ways. Although Spain was geographically massive, it was functionally bankrupt and in severe geopolitical decline. It had just lost the 30 Years' War, suffered crippling military defeats against France, and was on the verge of losing Portugal permanently. This is important because Mariana would eventually pay the price for all of it, not King Philip. The tragedy responsible for this occurred in September 1665. Mariana locked herself away in the deepest, darkest rooms of the Royal Alcazar in Madrid. The windows were shuttered and she sat in candlelight. For days, she refused to see anyone except her closest ladies-in-waiting and her confessor. She quickly stopped wearing her colorful royal dresses and put on a heavy outfit of solid black robes covered by a stark white nun's wimple that framed her face. She would wear this severe monastic look for the rest of her life. Protocol dictated that she could no longer attend the theater, listen to secular music, or participate in any form of public courtly pleasure. Her son, Charles, was only 4, which created another problem. Mariana was terrified. She was not a seasoned politician, but she was appointed Queen Regent and tasked with ruling Spain until Charles came of age. The reason was that on September 17, 1665, 60-year-old King Philip IV of Spain passed away. Ironically, some historians suspect that he might have survived if not for his royal physicians, who performed bloodletting on him, believing it to be an effective cure. They were clearly wrong, and this decision literally ruined Mariana's life. When she was handed control of the entire Spanish Empire, what happened next was worse than she could have imagined. One of the king's many illegitimate children was planning revenge against Mariana. Sadly, he succeeded. With Mariana now in power, she found herself in a deeply vulnerable position. As a foreign-born woman in a heavily male-dominated traditional court, she faced immediate pushback from high-ranking nobles. To survive, she relied on a series of her royal favorites. This angered many people. Mariana gave immense power to her personal priest, Johann Eberhard Neithard. He was a German Jesuit. Spanish nobles hated him because he was a foreigner and a religious man involved in politics. Philip IV's illegitimate son, John Joseph of Austria, was a skilled military leader and very popular with the people. He became Mariana's main enemy. John Joseph used the public's hatred of Neithard against her. In 1669, he forced Mariana to send Neithard away. Soon, John would do something to Mariana that nobody could have expected was even possible. But Mariana had a secret, luxurious advantage. On paper, court dwarfs were classified in the household registries alongside palace jesters. They were often gifted between royal households. Despite their low legal status, they enjoyed a level of comfort that elite nobles could only dream of. They lived inside the private quarters, comforted and played with royal children like Charles II and Margaret Theresa, and also traveled with the family. Because dwarfs legally existed entirely outside the traditional noble hierarchy, they had no independent political power, titles or lands to fight for. They could not scheme to take the throne. As a result, Mariana trusted them implicitly. They functioned as her eyes and ears. Powerful nobles and foreign ambassadors had to keep their distance, but court dwarfs were constantly in the room, overhearing secrets and measuring the true loyalties of visitors. But the secret they unfortunately did not hear was John's cruel plan for Mariana. Mariana's final days were incredibly difficult, and her own son would betray her. In 1675, Charles officially reached adulthood. In 17th century Europe, that happened at age 14 for monarchs, but Mariana still attempted to extend her regency by 2 more years. John Joseph managed to smuggle secret letters to the young king, playing on his desire to be free of his overbearing mother. On the night of January 6, 1677, Charles II secretly slipped out of the royal palace in Madrid and fled to Buen Retiro. Once safe, he issued an official royal decree naming his half-brother, John Joseph, as prime minister. With one move, Mariana legally lost control of both the king and the state. Then she received even more terrible news. With an angry mob outside, an army at the gates, no loyal soldiers to defend her, and her son against her, Mariana had zero leverage. Resisting meant a bloody civil war she was guaranteed to lose. John Joseph presented her with orders signed by her own son, stating that, for the peace and tranquility of the realm, she was commanded to leave Madrid immediately. She packed her belongings under heavy armed guard and was escorted out of the capital into exile. But Mariana had not said her final word. Soon, fate would turn. With Mariana exiled and her royal favorites in prison, John Joseph took absolute control of Spain. The public cheered him in the streets, expecting miracles. Instead, his 2 years in power were a textbook catastrophe. The teenage King Charles II was miserable. John kept him under strict surveillance, isolating the king just as Mariana once had. Charles grew to deeply regret betraying his mother. Before a second civil war could erupt, nature intervened. John Joseph died unexpectedly on September 17, 1679, at the age of 50. The moment her rival drew his last breath, Mariana did not even wait for an official invitation. She immediately left her palace and marched straight back to Madrid. When she entered the palace, her son Charles threw his arms around her, weeping and begging for her forgiveness. Mariana stepped right back into her role as the power behind the throne. She was incredibly desperate. Finding the perfect wife for Charles, one who could produce male heirs and save the empire, became her absolute obsession during her final years. But Mariana's story ended suddenly. On May 12, 1696, a total solar eclipse cast Madrid into sudden, eerie darkness in the middle of the day. For a deeply superstitious 17th century society, this was terrifying. The public and the court viewed it as a literal cosmic sign that the Queen Mother's life force was extinguishing. Surprisingly, they were right. Just after midnight on May 16, 1696, at the age of 61, Mariana of Austria took her final breath. She likely died of cancer. She ordered 50,000 church masses to save her soul. It was not because of some secret crime she had committed in the dark. It was because of the crushing burden of a life in which she failed to save the Spanish Empire, was blamed for her son's disabilities, and was forced to play ruthless political games just to keep her head above water. But this story does not end with Mariana's death. If you're interested in discovering the secrets of Mariana's son and finding out whether he succeeded in saving the empire, watch the next video.